So in this video, we're going to go over what is happening, why your brain is making you sick, and what you can do about that. Step one is just understanding it. It's the education piece. It's what you're doing right now by watching this video. So this is actively a part of your brain training journey. If this is a journey that you are trying to be on, it's understanding how your brain and nervous system cause physical symptoms. So a lot of what we used to understand about pain and physical symptoms is no longer accepted as true. Our brain uses pain and suffering in a lot of different ways to keep us safe and to keep us alive. Our bodies are smart. Our brains are incredibly smart. Evolution is very careful in the way it shapes the way our bodies evolve and change over time. And there are purposes for all of these things in our body. And our brain, our body, our nervous system is not giving us pain just to make us suffer. We need these things to stay safe. Imagine if you didn't know when your hand was in a fire because you couldn't feel that burning, or you didn't know when you were cutting yourself with something sharp so that you should stop, or you didn't know that you had eaten something poisonous and you didn't get those nauseous feelings, then you wouldn't know not to eat that again. So all of these things in the body are there to keep us alive. And at least in some cases with CFS and Long Covid, the brain is triggering symptoms because that part of your brain that is responsible for threat assessment is become hypersensitive. It's assessing things as threats internally and externally, which aren't actually threats. Another one of the big advancements in scientific discovery and our understanding of all of this is that the way that your brain, specifically your brain and your nervous system responds to threats and reacts in different situations is specific to you, and that's going to change over time. So how it is sort of wired to respond right now is not the same as it was necessarily 5 years ago or 20 years ago. And we also know now that our brains hold on to that neuroplasticity, that ability to change throughout our lives. So even though we might have developed these chronic conditions, chronic health conditions, these set neural pathways in our brain that have been this way for a really long time, we still have the ability to change them and potentially reverse them completely and get to a place where we are not experiencing these symptoms at all anymore. So your brain and your nervous system learn how to respond to various stresses through experiences, and it is looking to and reacting to things like your feelings, your fears, your emotions. And over time, because of the environment that we live in that looks nothing like the one that our brains evolved to thrive in, it can get set in an oversensitive, overprotective mode where things that are actually not harmless at all, it is registering as a threat, and as a result, causing this cascade of different things to happen in your body. And the evidence to support this comes directly from brain imaging studies, which have shown alterations in brain structure. And if you identify and resolve some of the factors that have sent your nervous system into a hypersensitive setting, you might be able to decrease how frequently and the severity of the response triggered by your nervous system. So with brain training activities and these things that address our nervous system and help keep that sympathetic nervous system response at bay, that fight or flight that's getting triggered all the time to the news, the media, social media, 8 devices in front of us at all times, being aware of every war, so many just atrocities happening in the world, just having so much coming at us every day, working crazy hours, the anxiety of keeping up with societal pressures, all of the things. It's training our bodies, our brain and our nervous system, that although these things might be unpleasant, they're not a threat to our survival. So what we're doing with all this is we're reprogramming the amygdala's response to various internal and external stimuli. And a big part of this is understanding the neurological origin of symptoms and trusting in the fact that your body is actually fine, that these symptoms are produced by thoughts, by feelings, by things in our environment, by these set neural pathways in our brain. It's like a computer. There is X happens, then Y. Stimulus response. It's very predictable. It happens every single time. This happens, it triggers that. This happens, it triggers that. And that just gets ingrained over time. And with the brain training, we're looking at changing that response. When X happens, now this happens. So when our brain and nervous system are assessing something to be a threat, we teach it that it's not. And by teaching that it's not a threat, it then, instead of that response being trigger symptoms, it then triggers you feeling fine. And of course, just because a symptom was triggered by the brain, it doesn't make it any less real. Most of us haven't been taught to understand how many of our physical symptoms are actually coming from the brain. So a lot of the pain, a lot of the sensations in our body have been triggered by our nervous system, have been triggered by our brain, which are working together. And it doesn't make them any less real or legitimate or horrendous. It just helps us understand how and why they're happening. And this one piece of your brain responsible for threat assessment is very important, perhaps the most important, because it's responsible for keeping you alive. And if it has inaccurately coded the world around you and life itself as a threat, then it will give you whatever symptoms, whatever pain, whatever extreme fatigue it has to keep you safe. Because it's better to have you laid out in your cave and safe than out in the world where it has determined it's pretty certain that you're gonna die. The simplest way to understand what's happening here is to think of this as a habit, because we think of brain training as something new and cutting edge, but it's something that we've all been doing for our entire lives. It's not something new at all. It's just new and that we're only just starting to understand it. But every habit that you have is a result of brain training. It's a result of a neural pathway that has been set in your brain, an automated response that happens. This is what habits are. So in essence, when conditions like ME/CFS and Long COVID are a result of this brain and nervous system oversensitivity, really what it is that you have created the habit of being sick. When this happens, I feel sick. When this happens, I feel sick. And it just spreads. Everything around you becomes a threat. And all of a sudden, virtually everything in your environment is a trigger. And it brings on fear. And it's just this loop of, exercise is bad. Too much social interaction is bad. It makes me feel sick. Reading makes me feel sick. And all of a sudden, you're scared of everything. And you're in this sort of downward spiral loop of your body trying to keep you safe. This is creating more fear responses. And you just get retreating further and further back in your cave, feeling trapped and not knowing how to break out of this cycle. So this is a process called habituation, which is when your brain recognizes a pattern and then creates a neural pathway to support it. The key to understanding this lies in something that's known as the habit loop. This is something that was introduced by Charles Duhigg, not sure if I'm saying this, in a book called The Power of Habit. And the habit loop consists of 3 components. And what this can look like in conditions like ME/CFS and Long COVID is that first there's a cue. So that's the trigger. It could be a thought, it could be something in our environment, something that is perceived as a threat. The next thing in the habit loop is routine. So what happens in response to that cue? In these cases, it's the triggering of symptoms. And then the third part of that loop is the reward. So this is the positive reinforcement that follows. And in this case, it is that you remain alive. To create new neural pathways, the first thing we have to do is to break this loop. We have to disrupt it in some way. And the first step in doing that is to recognize what's triggering it. This can be both external and internal things. And by recognizing what these triggers are in our internal and external environment, then we can start to make conscious decisions on how to respond to them. And then we take incremental steps to change this. And with these fatigue conditions, that's where these brain training exercises come in. We continually, through these tools, these exercises that we do, start to teach our brain and our nervous system that these things in our life aren't a threat. And then from there, we just continue to reinforce it. It's not like flicking a switch. It's not going to happen instantly. You need to have patience with this process. It took time to build those initial neural pathways. So it's going to take time to build new ones. And it's not also going to be linear, just like we see with these conditions, no matter how we're talking about it. There's going to be some symptom flares. It's going to take a while to show your brain and nervous system that things are safe. Sometimes it's still going to flare up and get scared and give you some symptoms, and that's okay. Just step back and look at your overall trajectory that I love to talk about and see that it's going up despite those peaks and dips in your path along the way. And when you zoom out, you can see that progress is happening. You know more now, you have more tools, and even if it doesn't feel like things are happening or changing as much or at all, that changes are happening because building these new neural pathways takes time. A really good way to visualize this is an example that was given in the book Atomic Habits. Imagine you have an ice cube that is sitting on a table in a cold room, and your goal is to melt that ice cube. And every day you increase the temperature in the room by about 1 degree. And every day you're putting the work in, you're bringing that temperature up, but the ice cube looks the same. For quite a while, it's going to keep looking the same. But despite it not looking any different, but despite the absence of visual, easily observable changes, there are structural changes happening in that ice cube. And at some point, it's going to seem to start happening quite rapidly. You're going to see it melting. And before you know it, all you're going to be left with was a puddle of water. And it wasn't that those changes just all happened at the end. They were happening the whole time. It's just change isn't always easily observable in the moment. So have patience as you go through this because it will take time, and trust the process and keep up with the habit. And this is how you get there. There are a lot of brain training exercises out there. It's not about learning as many different ones as you can. It's just about finding a couple that resonate for you and feel like a good fit for you, and then doing them as consistently as you can. But with moderation, with flexibility, without rigidity. You have to be compassionate with yourself in the process, not turn this into brain training boot camp. The goal is for this to be a good thing in your life, not something that adds stress. So whatever you manage to do, celebrate it, reward yourself, thank yourself for doing it, make it a positive experience, positive things we want to do more of. So think of these tools as a treat, these brain training exercises as an opportunity to you move towards your goals of start feeling better, and then just really celebrate the fact that you're doing them. I have a link for Curable, an affiliate link that you can use, and you'll get 6 weeks for free. So this is a great way to get free information on neuroplasticity and brain training strategies to start incorporating into your life. If you found value in this video, I invite you to consider subscribing if you haven't already, and please smash that like button because it makes the algorithm happy and will put this video in front of more people and helps me out as well. And if brain training is something that you are interested in and want to learn some more specific strategies, I'll link a video up right here that is a specific strategy for you to consider trying to be used when symptoms are flaring, to work to start minimizing those symptoms when they're happening, and then hopefully eventually eliminating them altogether. Whatever you're facing, keep at it. Don't give up. Good for you for being open-minded. Keep searching for your puzzle pieces. I believe you have totally got this. I thank you for watching this video. I hope you got something out of it. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope to see you in this next one.